people with a cane versus with a dog?
Yeah, look, I think you probably hit the nail on the head with the marketing tool aspect of it. So with the guide dog being a great marketing tool, people know a lot more about a guide dog rather than somebody using a long cane.
We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners at Burke Britton Financial Partners.
This is episode number 118 of the Finances podcast, and very fortunate today to have a full house. So I don't do it all the time when we have a full house, but today's guests are Simon McDonald-Kerr. We have also Melaine Robinson, and we have Zoe Duncan, as well as under the table we have Desi, who has joined us as well, and all of my guests today are part of Guide Dogs Victoria in some way, shape or form. I thought we'll take the opportunity to begin. We might run around the room and introduce each one of you. I'll start with you, Simon, if that's okay. Simon, your little bio that you sent me, thanks for sending that. You're regional team leader for Geelong Bendigo Northwest Metro, orientation and mobility specialist at Guide Dogs Victoria. Thanks for joining me, mate.
No worries.
Did I get all of your role and your title, everything okay?
Yeah, I wear a number of different hats at Guide Dogs, so you did pretty well.
Yeah, very good. All right, Mel, so you are the Planned Giving Relationship Coordinator at Guide Dogs Victoria, and you've been a client of Guide Dogs Victoria for almost 10 years. Thanks for coming along today.
Oh, my pleasure. And yes, quite correct, 10 years as a client, and just clocked over last Friday 2 years as an employee of Guide Dogs in the Plan Giving team in fundraising.
Awesome. As we continue around the table, Zoe had to sort of twist your arm to get you on mic today, but Zoe Duncan, do you want to tell me, we've only met this morning, and you didn't send me through a bio for coming on the podcast, which is totally fine. Tell me what role you serve with Mel and with Guide Dogs.
Yeah, so I'm actually not employed with Guide Dogs, but I've been Melanie's support worker for 5 years now.
6, I think.
6?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, yeah, no, it's 6 now, I think. So I met Melanie before she had a guide dog at all, and have sort of been there to watch a lot of the journey of Melanie meeting Desi, and we're up to where we are now. Yeah.
Great. And Mel, I might come back to you to introduce Desi. I was, for those listeners not watching, Desi's not a person laying under the table. Desi's a guide dog. Tell us a little bit about Desi, Mel.
Oh, my pleasure. I love talking about this dog. So her real name, she has a real name, and her I call it her racing name, is Deso. So she came into the world in 2017, which was the 60th anniversary year for Guide Dogs Victoria. And as a part of the celebrations, they had a special ceremony at Government House to celebrate 60 years of Guide Dogs. And as a part of that, the Governor of Victoria, Linda Dessau, was present at the ceremony. And as a bit of a surprise, they presented an 8-week-old puppy to the governor and said, "Here you go, Governor Dessau, this is Puppy Dessau, and hopefully she'll grow up to be a guide dog." And she's done just that, and I was matched with her 6 years ago last week. We just celebrated our 6-year anniversary, and I now call her Desi. So yeah, she has a racing name and she has a stable name, so her stable name is Desi.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Desi.
And I should describe her
Sure.
as well. Yes, I am blind, but I do have a little bit of vision, and I have been lucky enough to catch glimpses of her from time to time, and she's a beautiful golden coloured dog. She's quite a range of different shades throughout her, but her ears are quite dark, and then underneath her is quite light. Little female dog. So yeah, that's her.
It's interesting just what you did there. I know we're going to talk about etiquette. I had the pleasure of having a couple of Guide Dogs Victoria representatives on the podcast. I think it was episode number 77. It was Chris and
Karen?
Karen, that's right. Yep, if I get the pronunciate, Karen's go. You want to say it again? Karen, that's it. Yeah, he hit me up a couple of times getting it wrong. I've mispronounced it a couple of times. But anyway, we started to talk about etiquette, and we also started to talk about explaining the room. And you guys were doing this as we came into the room, just letting Mel know, where things are at, where the microphone is, and all these things that we take for granted as people with full vision. It's something that I really wanted to cover off on today. And again, for those listeners, we're on the corner of Gordon Avenue and Packington Street in Geelong West. Beautiful outlook over the Geelong West Park where the old fire station was. And anyone that's been to Paco Festa, all of the every culture with their float rolls past our office. So it's a beautiful part of the world and a beautiful day today. Sun's out, a bit cloudy, but beautiful day. Mel, I might stay with you, and maybe you talked about the fact that you've been a client of Guide Dogs Victoria. You're now an employee of Guide Dogs Victoria. Take me back a little bit and tell me a little bit about your story, about where you grew up, what life was like for you in the early days through to now as an employee of Guide Dogs.
Yeah, sure, Jay. How long have we got?
As long as you like.
So, I was born and raised in country Victoria in the Western District between Ararat and Hamilton. So I'm the eldest of three. I have a brother who's 2 years younger than me, a sister who's 5 years younger than me. And I was diagnosed with a hearing impairment at the age of 5. And it's a partial hearing loss. And back in the 1970s, the only reason it was picked up was I was the eldest, so my brother was a couple of years younger than me. But I was conversing at home, I was communicating, everything was all good, everything appeared to be normal. But when I started kindergarten, it was noticed that I wasn't engaging with the other children, and it was really strange because I was really bright and engaging at home, and I did a bit more further investigation and realised that I couldn't hear, and that's why the other kids weren't playing with me, because I couldn't hear them properly. So off we went, and they took my tonsils out and my adenoids out, and kids still can't hear, must be something more going on here. So eventually the diagnosis of nerve deafness was established, and I was fitted with hearing aids, and so that was my hearing loss journey. And then, of course, my siblings, as they came along, my brother was tested straight away, and then as soon as my sister was born, so I realised that all of us had this congenital nerve deafness, a partial hearing loss. And it was nowhere else in the family. Mum and Dad don't have any hearing or vision loss. So that was all good. We had very normal upbringing, very much not wrapped in cotton wool, typical farm kids. I was very much into horses, pony club, jumping, all that sort of cool stuff. And then my brother, I went off, got my driver's licence, everything was all good. I was driving, and then my brother went for his learners 2 years later, and I'd forgotten to take he wore reading glasses, and he'd forgotten to take his glasses to look at the eye chart in the RTA office. And rather than letting him go home and get his glasses and come back, the person at the Vic Roads counter said, "No, I think I want a full ophthalmologist report from you." So off we went, and just happened to have a new graduate ophthalmologist who had a particular interest in the retina. And she observed that my brother Matthew was wearing hearing aids, and she had heard of this condition called Usher's syndrome, which was affecting people with nerve deafness, and it was presenting as pigmentation on the back of the retina. So she had a really good look at my brother's retina, which most ophthalmologists at that time weren't doing, because it was a fairly newly recognised as, it's been around for years, but it just hasn't been picked up. But she put two and two together and said, I can see some pigmentation happening here. I reckon you've got retinitis pigmentosa. and in conjunction with your nerve deafness, there's a condition called Usher syndrome. And it is genetic, it's a recessive gene. Any other siblings in the family that wear hearing aids? Oh, yes, the 2 girls, they better be tested as well. So, so we were all tested and realised that we all had the condition. So, and the thing with the hearing loss is it's been stable. It's relatively stable, but the vision loss component, the retinitis pigmentosa, is progressive, and the main characteristics are night blindness and an increasing lack of peripheral vision. So, as I said, it is gradual. So I had managed to get my licence. I had a full licence. My brother had a restricted licence, but he managed to keep it for a few years before, and it had to be tested. His eyes had to be tested every year. And then once they realised that his peripheral vision, so his fields of vision, had become narrower, they cancelled his licence. In my situation, because I already had a full licence, it was pretty much voluntarily for me when I stopped driving, which gave my parents absolute headache. You can imagine, your child's out driving with a, potentially dangerous vision loss condition. But the night blindness was, I stopped driving at night pretty early because I was like, I really can't see. But I did continue driving for a little while, and I was a safe driver.
How old were you, Mel? You obviously had your licence, so...
So I think I continued to drive probably until my mid-20s, and then I moved. It was really interesting because I was living in Melbourne, driving around, and I was even driving at night because it's quite well lit in Melbourne. But then I moved out to Werribee, and you jump on the freeway and all of a sudden there's no lights, and I was like, this is bad.
Back when Werribee were just farm paddocks.
Exactly, and there was no, you pretty much got to Laverton and that was it. Your lights on the freeway were nothing. So that was when I was like, this is not good. And so eventually, I stopped driving in my mid-20s and started using a white cane. So I'd obviously moved to Melbourne growing up on a farm, knew I wanted to do veterinary nursing. That was something I always wanted to do. Knew that there wasn't a lot of scope back then in the 80s for nurses in the country, so I moved to Melbourne. And I started as a junior trainee nurse in a large animal welfare organisation. I continued there, I was working there for the next 31 years. And as my vision loss progressed, I transitioned from hands-on nursing roles into more administration and so on and so forth. And so as my vision loss started to deteriorate, I did some white cane training, and that was actually really interesting because I had a pet dog at that stage, and he was an Irish setter. Now, Irish setters don't have a great reputation for being particularly smart, but this dog was with me everywhere. He used to come with me when I drove. And then when I started my white cane training, because this dog was with me all the time, the trainer said, you know what, and I don't know whether you've come across this before, Simon, being an O&M, but this dog was with me all the time. And the person that was teaching me with the cane said, we're going to have to work around this dog because you're not going to lose him, are you? You're going to have him with you all the time. I said, yeah. And she said, but it's an Irish setter. How are we going to teach this dog to work around you using a cane? But we did. We managed it, and we did it. And obviously I lost that dog. Eventually he passed away, and I continued on using my cane for many years. And then eventually, as my remaining... Because my central vision had remained fairly functional. But then as the condition progressed and my central vision became less functional, that was when I thought, okay, maybe I need to go down the track of guide dog mobility. And so I did that in 2018. And so I had my white cane training initially with what was known as the Royal Victorian Institute for the Blind. That was back, 25 years ago. And then about 10 years ago, I knew that I needed to do some refresher caning because we really do need to keep our skills refreshed. You can fall into bad habits. And so I took up with Guide Dogs Victoria for the first time and commenced as a client there. And then when I made the decision to go to Guide Dog Mobility, I ended up getting the beautiful Desi.
Now, I'm sure, Simon, we'll talk about support services available or those that are lacking at the moment. But maybe, Mel, just before I jump on to Simon, when you've had a span there as your vision has deteriorated over time, over a number of decades, being a client, not of guide dogs, but I forgot who did you say?
They were known as RVIB, so the Royal Victorian Institute for the Blind, which are now known as Vision Australia. So
Okay.
they had, so back then, this was,
How would you parallel the services back then with when you were in your mid-20s versus what exists today as a client of Guide Dogs Victoria?
Yeah, so the cane training, I think it's obviously techniques and strategies have improved over time. I think we've become more efficient, but I think the basic, and Simon will be able to correct me on this, but I think the basic structures around using a white cane are fairly similar. But I think just in terms of communicating what's going on in the environment and things that you need to be aware of. I mean, back when I first started training, you didn't have to deal with pedestrians walking along with their heads in their phones, whereas now that's something that we do need to, to take into consideration. So yeah, just those sorts of things. But I think basically it's similar. Yeah.
Okay. What about public perception of people with low vision or blindness?
Yeah.
Do you feel as though it's changed?
That was an interesting question, Jay, because again, I was in my 20s, and when you're in your 20s, you think everybody's looking at you and that sort of thing. But I think the most, in terms of public perception, there's a really interesting difference between someone using a cane and someone using a dog. I think that's where the perception differences I've noticed more. But that's...
So what would they be? What's the difference between the perception of a cane versus dog?
The really interesting thing is that I find that now that I'm a guide dog handler, I have more people actually saying to me, "Oh, can I assist you? Is there anything you need any help with?" More than I had with the cane. Whereas in actual fact, I probably could have used more assistance with the cane at times rather than the dog. So I think that the dog tends to promote more conversation. People are more willing to approach you when you've got a dog than if you're trundling along with the cane. People are just so, and it's a good thing, they're engineered to just jump out of your way, hop out of the way. So, we let this person do their thing. They're obviously concentrating, they're using a cane, just let them do their thing. So that's the biggest thing for me, is I've found that more people want to approach you and talk about the dog. And that was another thing with taking on guide dog mobility. I was very aware that you're not just dogs will evoke conversation with people. So
they're a great marketing tool, aren't they?
They're
beautiful.
But as a handler, you have to be prepared to take that on. In my mind, this is the thing for me. Like, I considered it a huge responsibility. I knew that taking on a guide dog, you were also taking on an education role, and you had to be prepared to really, to talk to the public more. I was already, occasionally people would talk to me about my blindness with my cane, but I just knew, being a vet nurse, I knew that there would be more of those conversations. So, and I just feel, I know not all guide dog handlers would, I'm just a bit of an overthinker, but I considered it a real responsibility to really educate the public about that as well.
Is that been your experience too, Simon? Again, maybe we'll answer that question, then we'll run to a little bit of your backstory in the lead up to guide dog. But what's your experience in terms of perception in the time that you've been working with guide dogs? How do people perceive people with a cane versus with a dog?
Yeah, look, I think you probably hit the nail on the head with the marketing tool aspect of it. So with the guide dog being a great marketing tool, people know a lot more about a guide dog rather than somebody using a long cane. And the major difference between the two of them is that a cane is an obstacle finder. So when someone's using a cane, they're often hitting their cane into an obstacle to find out where it is and then negotiate and walk around it. Whereas a dog is an obstacle avoider. So the dog makes the decision and it locates where the obstacles are in front of you and then will walk you around them. So I think when you see somebody out in the community, people find it much easier to, number one, interact with someone with a dog. It's something to talk about, and that's the introduction. Whereas if you see somebody who's walking around bashing a cane into something, then it seems to be one of those things where people find it quite awkward to know where the conversation starts, even just to offer help. So, so that's probably where the major difference is. Has it changed over time? Look, I think it has with some education, but across the board, it's probably within the community, it's not well known as to what a long cane actually does for somebody. Really, the only thing that we tend to see with it is a couple of TV shows or movies where that might be the case of somebody walking around and just tapping it from side to side, and often they're not bumping into obstacles because that's not how it's portrayed in the media. So, yeah, I think it's just somewhat of a lack of education.
It's interesting, Mel, you mentioned that you take on a bit of a responsibility as an educator when you're a handler. You've got to be, some people I'm sure might not be that wanting or willing to, have conversations with random people along the street. But I was also thinking about how Desi's kind of a double-edged sword. Look, when you came into the office, entryway, like my immediate instinct as an animal lover is to, get out of my hands. I've had labs and retrievers, and that's maybe to the point of etiquette. Maybe Simon, again, I still haven't got to your backstory, but maybe touch a little bit on handler and I suppose guest etiquette when it comes to dealing with guide dogs.
Yeah, it's a really, and you know what, I have. They're beautiful dogs, and people who like dogs are always drawn to them, and it's such a double-edged sword. And people will often, we have a little saying at Guide Dog, we had a little campaign last year, I think it was, and it was called Talk to the Handler, which is basically please interact with the handler, not the dog. But also acknowledging that it just happens. And so my way of getting around it is, and it happens a lot, like getting on a crowded train, or we're standing there, and you just know that people are going, just have a sneaky pat. She won't be able to tell, she's blind, But we do, because our dogs give them away. And I tend to find myself just saying, "Oh, you're patting my dog," and then you hear this, "Oh, sorry." I said, look, please don't pat her. She is actually working. It doesn't look like it, but she is working, and I need her to focus. And then I often just say, look, I'm sorry, they should make these dogs ugly, so you don't want to pat them, shouldn't they? And it tends to lighten the mood a little bit. Most times that works. But it is really important. But it goes against, and working as a vet nurse as well, we used to do it all the time. Clients would walk into the clinic, and you go, "Oh, hello, Oscar, Fluffy, aren't you just adorable?" And so, what was your name? to the client of the dog. But that was acceptable in that environment. Clients wanted you to fuss over their dogs. Whereas with a working guide dog, that it can be really distracting to a dog. And getting back to her name, this is a really good thing, because a lot of people will often say to me, "Oh, what's her name?" And when I say, "Oh, her name's Deso," people just go, "Oh, okay." It's a hard word to get your name around, which is good, because if I said her name is Desi, they would most like, "Oh, Desi, you're so beautiful." And all of a sudden, dog's focus is off me and on the person mentioning her name. So that's that's a big thing. So please talk to the handler, not the dog.
That's a great tip, great advice. Simon, we got there. We're going to tell us a little bit about your foray into guide dogs Victoria. You can go back a little bit longer than that. Where'd you grow up yourself? What was life like for you as you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in southeast Melbourne, and finished schooling and went into studying myotherapy. I think if you live in Geelong, you probably know what a myotherapist is. But predominantly work with muscle and soft tissue problems. So while I was studying that, I was also doing hospitality, and what I expected to be a short period of time ended up being around about 8 years of dabbling in hospitality as well. But once I completed my myotherapy course at RMIT, I then went into some private practice and was also working with some professional sports teams as well. So while I enjoyed aspects of that. I knew that my the physicality of it, my hands after 5 years were pretty trashed, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to continue that as a career long term. The elements that I liked about that job, though, was probably educating the patients that I had about what was happening with them and what they could do, beyond just that therapy that I was providing to get themselves where they wanted to get to. So I have a family member who decided they were my careers counsellor and said they were working at Guide Dogs as an orientation and mobility specialist, which is what I am now. And basically that, my profession is to teach people with low vision and blindness how to travel safely and independently in whatever environment it is that they need to. So whether that's home, community, school, work, whatever that is. So they said to me that, I think that you might enjoy this. Why don't you come and have a look at it? Because no one's ever heard of this profession unless you've had to seek the service yourself or you know somebody who works in the field. And right from the word go, I think within 10 minutes I was like, this is what I'm into. This is what I'm going to be doing for a fair portion of my life moving forward. So went back and studied at La Trobe University, postgraduate course in orientation mobility. As I said, it's a pretty niche field. So the year I graduated, there was only 4 people across the country. And that's not unusual. We're lucky. One of the things I do at Guide Dogs now is also look after the student placements, and I think there'll be between 12 to 18 people graduate this year, which is probably the highest it's been for the last 10 years. So it is a very, very niche field, what we're working in. But I've now been at Guide Dogs for 14 years. It'll be 15 in January. So
happy anniversary. What's the 15-year anniversary? Will you get a...
I'll have to let you know in January.
I'll have to work out what 15-year anniversaries are. Platinum or something like that, I'm sure.
That's right. So, but look, leading on in terms of to what Mel was talking about as well with etiquette. I know you mentioned that before, Jay, and I think one of the things is, and I can only speak from a professional point of view, not a lived experience point of view. So it's important to hear, from people like Mel with lived experience about how they like to be, engaged, how they like to be treated. But number one is always engage with the person first. And don't be afraid to ask. Like, low vision and blindness isn't something to be scared of, to be worried about. Showing some vulnerability about not knowing about it is not a bad thing. I think if you go and ask somebody with low vision and blindness, is there any, I don't know too much about, about low vision and blindness. Can you tell me a little bit more about how I might be able to support you or how I might be able to help you? If you see somebody who's crossing a road, to ask them first if, can I provide any help to you? And if they say yes and you're not too sure how to do that, you can ask them, how would you like me to help you? I guess the message that I'd like to get out is that don't be afraid to ask. That's people appreciate your engagement rather than disengaging and ignoring them or not knowing how to approach something. Just give it a go. Yeah.
You said 14 years, nearly 15 years. 4 graduated back when you were in going through your program to now nearly 24. What else have you seen change in your decade and a half with Guide Dogs or in the low vision and blindness? I'll say industry, but space.
Yeah. There's plenty that's changed. Obviously, technology is the thing that people jump to when they look at what advances have there been, and there's been a huge amount of advances in technology. It is an interesting space, though, where, as I mentioned, it's a niche area, and while there's a huge population of people who do have low vision or are blind, the amount of people that actually require support from technology and things like that is still quite small on the grand scale of things. So we've seen some great things. There's, apps on iPhones now, or on smartphones at least, where you can just simply apply some voiceover. You can use voice to text, things like that. That's really helped people. There's some apps where you can aim the camera at it and take a photo and it'll tell you what it is. There's obviously GPS has come a huge way. I know when I started that there was the old TomTom GPS that you'd attach to your car and things like that, and it was pretty clunky. It didn't work necessarily that well in CBD locations with large buildings. Now on a phone people can jump in and access a lot of GPS devices, and there's specific apps for people with low vision or who are blind that really assist them to get the information that they need to travel around. So in that space itself, huge advances. I guess the traditional type of services that have been provided, which is guide dog mobility and orientation and mobility, which is learning, the long cane or how to use your vision, things like that. It is very traditional in the way that it's still taught. It probably the movement of where it's come from, it has a very, a military background. A lot of the services were developed for soldiers returning from the war. So the way that it's taught is very, very structured. And that in itself is probably where the change has been, is that we've adapted from that really structured approach to probably looking at how we can best individualise our services for each person, so that we're really meeting their needs and their learning styles and things like that. So that's probably where that's advanced the most.
Talking about, sorry, Mel, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to agree 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that guide dogs do really, really well, is that they've got the grounding from that structure, but they adapt to the individualisation really, really well. Yeah, but still keep within that professional structure, and it's so appreciated. Especially by someone like myself, that I do like structure and order, but I like to be listened to as well, and guide dogs do that really well.
Yeah, I think recognising that everyone is different, and when we talk about technology supports, it would be remiss of me not to segue now into physical human support. Zoe, I didn't mean to leave you hanging there for those few minutes, but maybe we talk a little bit about the support role that you help with Melanie. How long have you been supporting Mel? And I think you mentioned at the beginning, or maybe off mic. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with Melanie.
Yeah, so
just sneak in a little bit close to that mic.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
So about 6 years ago, I was in my undergrad studies of psychology. And to get myself a bit of work experience, I got into disability support. So I've worked with lots of different people with disability, but Melanie was the first person I ever worked with a vision impairment, which was really an interesting learning curve, because kind of like you were saying, Simon, I felt a bit awkward about, how do I, support Melanie best, and I'm like, what do I do when I can't use my body language or facial expressions as much? And then I'll just kind of ask Melanie, how do you want me to do this? And how do you want me to do that? Or do you even need me to support you with this part? Or do you want me to let you do that on your own? So it was really conversational, and I felt like it was really great. We just kind of developed this great working relationship, and it was all conversational. And I'm actually someone who talks a lot to myself out loud, which helped Melanie a lot.
It's fantastic for me because, I always know what Zoe's doing because she's talking out loud. So it's great, and particularly when we're working on the computer together, and Zoe will be doing some stuff very collaborative in terms of that sort of stuff. So,
yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because let's think about how we all tend to assume. You have a little story in your head about, maybe I shouldn't say that, whereas, like you said, doing what seems to be the obvious thing, which is actually just open your mouth up and have a conversation, is probably the most powerful thing you could do.
100%.
And actually let people know what's in your head
100%.
Rather than, telling yourself stories about what you should or shouldn't do. Ask someone a question.
Exactly.
I suppose communication 101, isn't it?
Absolutely. And even just, the etiquette thing, don't just stand there. Let someone know you're there. It's like, hi, I'm here, because we can't see you.
And I suppose from knowing how I've interacted, I think on my previous podcast I talked about some of the the follies that, you know, I've experienced myself over time, like, you know, reaching out a hand and realizing that that person, I haven't actually said my hand is extended to shake someone's hand, or you know, as we said earlier, like just letting people know what the room looks like. Like it's again, just those assumptions in your head that I think as you start to have more conversations, as we start to educate, like nearly every topic we talk about on this podcast, and Peter, my father, who is the founder of this business, and probably I'll get to this at the end, is probably the reason that all of you are sitting here today and this business talking to guide dogs and other charities. It is relationships and communication. They're the two things that really, if you need to fall back on anything, you can open your mouth and you can communicate, and you can build relationships, and by doing that, you can educate. You can educate yourself, and you can educate others about topics that you're not aware of.
100%. And I'll just jump in here too, that Zoe has this great story about, you know, obviously Zoe worked with me before I had a guide dog and I was using a cane, and then I transitioned to using a guide. So then Zoe had to work out how to work with me and the dog, and I'll let her explain. She's got some lovely examples of how that all came about. I think it's just a classic example of being open to those communications and, you know, and conversations. So.
Yeah. So along with Melanie being the first person I worked with who had a vision impairment, Desi is my first guide dog I've ever interacted with, and I'm also not an animal person, so it was really kind of like strange for me, like having this, you know, dog around all the time at first, and I was like, oh, well, you know, like it was confusing to me a bit, sort of knowing what my role was with Desi, but we actually ended up becoming like a nice little working team together, because I realised, okay, there's like gaps of things that we can't sort of fill in with each other, and we found a way to communicate. Like, so me and Desi sort of have our own weird communication. It's a lot of facial expressions, and so there's some commands I've learnt, but like a lot of it is, we have our own weird little manners. So one of the first times I realised that, you know, we sort of become like working colleagues was, so I used to take Melanie to the gym, and to get to the gym it was up some stairs, and actually we would use the elevator. So we'd use the elevator and then go through two different doorways, and it was all awkward and clunky, and I'm used to standing on one side of Melanie, but then Desi would be on the other side, but obviously all three of us can't all walk together in the hallway. So I would sort of walk ahead and I would have Desi follow me. So I'd say, Desi, follow, and sort of tap my hip. But then we'd get to one doorway and I'd have to hold the door open, and that follow command doesn't really work. So I would we'd practice going through the doorway, me in front of her at one point, and then I, at some later point, just held the door open, and I just kind of looked at Desi, and Desi would look at me, and she just knew to take Melanie forward at that point. So yeah, it got to a point where eye contact with me and Desi, like it was like we trusted each other, that I'm like, okay, I know that you're going to take Melanie through the door and to the seat and where she needs to go, and I could step back a little bit, which was nice.
And take care of the door.
Yeah, but then like if we were in places like we've gone to the airport a couple of times, right, which is a totally new environment, and I'm like, okay, we need to get to the checkout desk or check-in desk, and then we got to get to security, and again the three of us can't all walk together, so I'd do a Desi follow, and I'd keep looking behind, and Desi would make eye contact with me, and like I knew she was following pace. Like it was really cool.
Except when she went off tracking cans.
Yeah, was that when she went to go? Was that in the hotel? And it was it was the water feature in the hotel that was at.
Well, she got distracted by a water feature.
Yes, there was a water feature that was like at foot level, so like I could barely even see it myself. And I say, Desi, follow, and I'm walking towards the desk. I turn around and Desi's veering off to the side, and she's gone to have a drink at the water fountain.
But she'd looked up, and I heard Zoe say, "Oh, Melanie." I thought, "Oh, hang on, I'm not behind her." And Zoe said she looked at Desi, and Desi looked at her, and it was almost like, "No, I'm going to look at the water."
Yeah, she was looking at me to see how, like if she could kind of get away with it.
Mel, do you travel often on plane or not?
Yes, I love travel, and the really great thing, and I love flying with her. It is so special. She flies, with me on the aircraft. There's quite a procedure around travelling with an assistant dog, and I always fly with Virgin. Give Virgin a plug here. They've always been really good. And the process is that the dog has to sit in the window seat space on the floor, and then I sit in the middle seat, and whoever's travelling with me will sit on the aisle. But the great thing about Des, and this comes back to the matching of the dog with the handler. There's so many things that you have to consider, and the matching team at Guide Dogs did it so well on so many levels. I've got so many stories around how well they've matched the two of us. But even the fact that I said, look, I fly a lot, I like to fly. And Desi is, you can probably describe her a bit better, Jay, but she's quite a small, petite dog for a Labrador. She's only 26 kilos. So to travel on an aeroplane, she curls herself up quite nicely, doesn't she, Zoe? She just curls up and goes to sleep. And I know she's comfortable because she's not too big. So, but she's a great traveller. She travels better, flies a lot better than a lot of people, I think.
Can I ask a silly question? Does Desi need a seat? I mean, do you need to pay for a seat for Desi or not?
No. Luckily for us at the moment here in Australia, no. We don't have to pay that extra cost for a seat. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Because that obviously would be a fairly big inhibitor for travel.
It would be, absolutely. But, I mean, they're a mobility aid. So, yeah, it's something that helps us get from A to B. And she does do that, and she does that beautifully. Like, she can work on an aircraft, she'll do what Zoe was saying before, follow the air crew off, and then once we get off the plane and then just traverse through the terminal, even though she's never been there before, she's fine. She's got someone to follow. She will guide me, accordingly.
Have you been able to travel internationally with her?
COVID stuffed that up.
Okay.
I did want to, but the thing, people do travel internationally with their dog, but it's a lot. It's a lot of work in planning, and it's hard on the dogs too. I believe it's hard on the dogs. So in my mind, I thought, I would love to go. I have a really good friend in Switzerland. I visit Switzerland quite frequently. Well, I like to visit Switzerland when I can. And I would absolutely love to have gone to Switzerland and created some memories with this dog. But like I said, I got her in 2018, and with a trip like that, I feel that you really need time. Like, getting a guide dog doesn't just happen like that. You have to build the team. You have to build the relationship, and that takes time. That can take up to 2 years to be really solid. So I thought, okay, especially she's my first dog. This is my first foray into this type of lifestyle. So I didn't want to do it in the first 12 months. I thought it just wouldn't be fair on me or the dog. It's just too much. So, and then on the other end of the spectrum, I wouldn't want to put a dog that's any older than 4 or 5 through a trip like that. So that was where COVID kind of got in the way. But who knows? Eventually, I would like to do it one day with a dog.
Yeah, my head's just running about all the things you take in for granted when you're travelling. The logistics, and I've got a reasonably big family, but if I'm travelling on my own, I don't think much other than I've got my credit card, I've got the clothes on my back. That's all I need, rather than, thinking where am I going to land? Do they have the same rules, regulations about if you're going to have internal flights? Do they have the same quality as Virgin do here? It's huge.
But even just travelling domestically, again, another story from when I've travelled with Zoe, and again the etiquette thing. Again, it was Cairns, going through the airport, and Zoe's always got eyes out for people, trying to distract Desi. And going to remember that lady with her 3 kids going through the security. And, it was like Zoe. I could hear Zoe go, no touchies, and she's basically fending these kids off as they're trying to dart around her to pat Desi.
Sounds like my family, I think. Remind me to word my kid. I've got 5 kids, so everywhere from 18 to 5, and they love animals. They're
no touchies when they're in harness.
That's right. Yeah, I'll make sure that they listen to this as well. Talking about services, obviously you have a good plug to Virgin, which is great in terms of they offer a fantastic service. What other services? This is maybe a question for you, Simon. Like, what other services are available to people if they lose their vision? So let's kind of talk about what's there, what's available. How can people get access to services if they need them?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that isn't known is the breadth of service that we provide at Guide Dogs Victoria. And I might lean on the example of travelling overseas as well, but we do provide services to people of all ages. So we've got an early childhood service, so starting from birth, essentially, where that service would, work really closely with parents and families, potentially about a new diagnosis or something that's that they're unfamiliar with, and guide them through, like, what support they might require so that their child has the best opportunity to meet developmental milestones in line with their peers. So that's a really important service that we've been able to add sort of within the last 5 years at Guide Dogs Victoria, and watch that grow. Very, very important to us to see that continue to grow. We've got orientation mobility, which I've spoken about beforehand, and that is probably where we talked about Mel heading overseas, and maybe that it's not an environment that her dog's going to feel really supported in, and be able to travel from a an animal well-being point of view, is to be able to have the skills to jump on a plane, head overseas, and be able to negotiate that environment as safely and as independently as you possibly can. Now, that doesn't mean you just jump off the plane and be able to get around by yourself necessarily, but it does allow that if you're getting some support with your travel, to at least be making independent travel decisions. Where am I going? What am I doing? How am I getting there? Directing that person who might be assisting you, rather than being at their peril. So when I think it's fair to say that for clients that come on board at Guide Dogs Victoria, at the back of our mind, that's what we're kind of aiming for. Mm-hmm. Like, their immediate goals might be to just get from, home to work. But we'll be looking at, in the background, thinking about teaching them the skills that are going to be transferable to expanding their travel and their world as much as they possibly can. So, especially with kids that we work with, that's something where, we don't want to limit them from our own perceptions, and that's something that goes across the board with the other services we provide. So for people with low vision, we have orthoptists on staff, and what they can do is do an assessment in the environment that they're living in. So instead of a clinical assessment that you might find if you went to an ophthalmologist, who will tell you that, all right, here's kind of like what you can see in a clinic without testing, they're looking at, okay, how are you actually using your vision within your home, and what are the things that might benefit that? So it might be some change of lighting for people, it might be some magnification and things like that. We've got assistive technology specialists, and they look, obviously it's an individualised approach, but they want to know, like, what's your goals? What do you need to access? What are going to be some real wins for you? Maybe you've had, you enjoyed watching TV, but you've had a change in your vision where that's now no longer possible without a level of frustration. What other options have we got for you that are there? It might be that your change in vision has meant that, if you're still getting bills in the mail, that you're not able to actually read them and find out what the information is and when you're meant to pay those bills. So having some sort of technology where it can scan the page and then read it out to you, to be able to get that information. And then we've got our occupational therapists, so they're going to be working with all things, typically with activities of daily living within the home. occupational therapists outside of the low vision and blindness space would often do travel training. For us, it is very specific because of the types of mobility aids that we teach. So that's where our orientation mobility specialists would step in, but work very closely with that team as well. And that's kind of, ticks the majority of boxes for people, but we complement all of that by adding on some group programs. And the group programs, what they do is they open up some social opportunities where you get you get a chance to probably be around some other people who are experiencing things that are unique to you that you don't necessarily have other people to relate to in your immediate community or family with as well. So I think the last time when you had some guide dog staff on, Karen maybe talked about the importance of that for him, for just that, being engaging with people who really understand what you're going through. Yeah. So myself, I don't have low vision or blindness. I can't sit here and say that I know what Mel's gone through. I can certainly empathise, from a point of trying to understand and listen to her story and get some perspective. But group programs, create more of an opportunity for that. But it's also skill development, and when you can do that with peers, it gives you a bit of a barometer to see, where am I up to? Where am I at? Can I learn something off somebody else as well? So that's a really powerful thing that we offer as well at Guide Dogs. And it's actually pleased to say that we're literally this week just had the tick for creating a group program just in Geelong at the end of January for young people. So we're going to have kids of primary and secondary age in the local region and run a day program here, but also have people from Metro Melbourne or from other areas of Victoria that are able to travel to Geelong for the day and get to have a bit of an experience travelling around our wonderful town. So looking forward to that as well.
That's a lot of services, Simon. There's when I think about, I'm looking at the guide dog that we sponsored. We've got a little sign over here for those that are listening only. In 2022 it was class of 2022. We had guide dog Ollie B that we that the team here sponsored. But all of the services that you've talked about, they're not free, and it requires manpower, people power, technology, support at very, very at vastly different levels. How do guide dogs go about funding all of those? And I suppose what I'm getting to is, how can people support either in kind, with whether it be volunteering, getting involved with programs, or financially? How can they actually support?
Yeah, look, I guess the first thing to have a look at is, most people are quite familiar with the National Disability Insurance Scheme. That is one way that our programs get funded, but it doesn't allow us to deliver all the services in the way that I guess that our clients want and need. We've got a variety of different funding streams that we access. So
I can talk about those from a plan giving perspective.
Sure,
but but definitely. From volunteering and that sort of stuff, if you wanted to touch on that.
Look, I think from a volunteering point of view, locally we've got a lot of puppy raisers, and that's something that we need more of. Yeah. I guess that's something that you can never have enough of. And, particularly in Geelong, we certainly take pride in being able to see our pups, being in this environment and growing up. It's a pretty, great training ground for a lot of our dogs. So if we can have more puppy raisers, that's that from a volunteer perspective.
Can I ask that question there? What do you need to do to be a puppy raiser?
Yeah, look, the best thing to do is to contact Guide Dogs Victoria. You'll find out where we've got some information sessions that are available, and get the most up-to-date and accurate information about going through that process. So we've got a 1-800 number. I might plug it now.
Yeah, go for it.
1-800 804 805. And our customer service team will be able to steer you in the right direction. So regardless of whether you've got a query about puppy raising or services or anything beyond that about how you can get involved, that's certainly, the number to call, and we can steer in the right direction.
So are you going to be a puppy raiser now that you and Desi have such a great relationship? Has it brought you around to being a more of a animal person?
Yeah, I'd love to be a puppy raiser.
Beautiful.
They're they're such beautiful dogs, and they're really easy to love, but they also do such an important job for people, and I think it's a really great thing to do, puppy raising.
Mel, you started talking about from a volunteer point of view, or how else can people support?
Yeah, so I guess, yes, exactly as Simon touched on, yes, NDIS can help contribute towards some of our services, but there's always a shortfall. It costs $50,000 to breed, raise and train one of these dogs. So yeah, that's a huge outlay, and I think you've touched on that this organisation has sponsored a dog. So that's an incredible thing to do, but that's also a huge commitment, a huge outlay. But there are other financial streams as well. We have our puppy raiser, our puppy pals program, which is people can support us financially just with a monthly deduction from your account, and you become one of our puppy pals, and you get updates on a certain litter at a certain time. And we have other every now and then we might do appeals that come out. We have a Christmas appeal coming out where we could ask for donations. We also have our gifts in wills. That's my particular area that I really like to work in, or I'm working in the plan giving team, which encompasses philanthropy and also gifts in wills. Gifts in wills is a tricky one. No one wants to talk about that part of our life, but it is something that, that really everybody should consider it. And if you would consider leaving a gift in your will to guide dogs, that's just another really beautiful way to leave a legacy.
I think that's a really good one, and it aligns very closely with the conversations that we as financial advisors have with clients. Excuse me. Sorry, Desi's moving around under the table there. We definitely don't like talking about our mortality, but the reality is that it's an important conversation, and there is so much good that can be done when people are thinking about how they pass on their assets. So I'm a massive advocate of people. Number one, make sure you've got wills and powers of attorney in place. That's number one. And number two, think about how you want those funds to be distributed when you're no longer about. And a legacy is a great way of doing that. Is there anything we've missed in terms of how else people can actually support Guide Dogs Victoria?
Look, I think probably just raising the knowledge that guide dogs, the breadth of support and services that we provide, so that so that the general public really understand what we're about, and that those really important donations that come to Guide Dogs Victoria, they allow people, no matter at what stage of their path of low vision or blindness that they're on, to be able to do the things that they want to do. So, that's probably the main thing, is for people to understand that, not only do those donations allow us to do that, but just to have some trust that, and I can speak from personal experience, the people at Guide Dogs Victoria, it is probably what the whole organisation's built on, is people, and the passion that exists within our workplace is the reason why I stay there. That's something that you can sort of take some confidence in, is that the people that are out there delivering this, and we take it really seriously. We take it, the fact that people are donating their funds to guide dogs, we've got a real responsibility with getting out there and doing the best job that we can, so that people can live the lives that they want.
Yeah, it's awesome. And on the awareness piece, it's funny because we started as a financial planning podcast. We're a financial planning business here at Burke Britton, but the reality was that our our business is built on relationships, and those relationships with people in the community. They're with our clients who have all varying needs, and they have issues in their life, opportunities in their life, and we see this podcast as an opportunity to put on a platform, give a voice to a lot of the organisations. I normally start with some of this, but it's probably a nice way to close out that Peter, my father, founder of this business, one of his great contributions to the Geelong community and the Shepparton community where we have, and also the Melbourne community where we have a lot of clients, has been very focused on philanthropy, part of that through our AMP Foundation work, and also the Future Generation program that I know I was trying to look up some numbers before, has made some reasonable contributions to not only Guide Dogs Victoria but a number of charities. I think the total since 2018 we're just short of $1 million of contribution. Now that is not that's a combination of AMP Foundation, our clients, Burke Britton, but I think it goes a long way to I suppose give all credit to Peter in the culture that he's actually built in this business, and the sort of the emphasis on relationships and community that still will outlast Peter. I know Peter, he won't mind me saying that, but it will continue well and truly beyond him. We're honoured to have had you guys on the podcast. Not only this time, but hopefully we can have you all back on for a second or a third round at some point in the future. But before I close things out, is there any closing call to action or a message that any of you would like to say? And I might start to my left, Zoe. I might start with you. Anything you'd like in closing to say before we wrap this one up?
Oh, that's a big question. I think... I mean, from what I've seen, Guide Dogs has made a massive difference in the lives of not just Melanie, but everyone that Desi interacts with. I think Desi's changed my life in a really big way. For one, she's made me much more of an animal person, but I can relax a lot more, when me and Melanie are working together, and, in the sense that, I think maybe before Desi, I was a lot more worried about, making sure everything would go right. And I think Desi's given me a lot more confidence that everything's going to be okay. And it's been amazing. And my journey with Melanie is very much intertwined with Desi, and it's amazing. And I love what Guide Dogs has been able to give to us.
So there's hope for all those non-animal lovers out there at the moment that maybe one day they can love animals just as much as you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. Mel, what about you? Any closing call to action or thoughts before we finish this one up?
Consider leaving a gift in your will to Guide Dogs, please, and then I will look after you. We do. We have our wonderful Otis Fellowship program, which is our beautiful bequesters, but people who have made that decision to do that. But look, just that awareness again, just we are more than dogs. As much as I am a very proud guide dog handler, I did just recently participate in a refresher white cane training that was geared around guide dog handlers, and again, it embraced my enthusiasm for O&M and orientation mobility and the things that people like Simon do. He's nailed it. The culture in this organisation is just incredible. It's a wonderful organisation to be connected to, and we appreciate all the support that anyone can give us.
Now, if someone wants to leave a bequest in a will, what should they do?
The same as what Simon said before. You can call 1800 804 805. Our website, the Guide Dogs Victoria website, has some really good information and some links on there as well. So please reach out and say that you heard Melanie on this podcast, and we can take it from there.
Awesome. Over to you, Simon. Wrap this one up, mate. What any closing call to action for our listeners?
Well, I guess the first thing is to thank the listeners and your clients who've contributed to the Fidgers Fund. It makes a difference, not only for our organisation, but being a Geelong local, you see it across the board with the other organisations that you've supported. So I was lucky enough to come along to one of the Christmas dinners. I think it might have been when it was before COVID at least, out at Finesford, and hear and see about some of the other organisations that you support. So, extend our thanks for what you've been able to do, for the Geelong community as a whole, but particularly with Guide Dogs Victoria. So I guess that's my first thing. And secondly is that, please spread the word. I can speak to the team that we've got here at Guide Dogs Victoria that if yourself, a family member or somebody else that you know, if they've had a change in their vision and they need to access services, you're in the best place in Victoria because we've got a great team here, and look forward to if you are steered towards our way, that we help you achieve your goals and get to where you want to be. So
beautiful. Well, I'll make sure that we put all your socials and the website and links to the bequests, and if someone wants to be what was it? You said it was a puppy. What was the
Puppy
name?
Pal.
A puppy pal.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
We'll put the links to that in the show notes. Thank you again, Zoe, Mel, Simon, and Desi for joining us today.
I think she's sneaking over to you.
She is. I said her name then, and she heard her name. She's over having a look out the window now, seeing what's going on out on Paco. But thanks again. Look forward to having you guys back on in future episode. Thanks again.
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Burke Britton FP, or Google Burke Britton Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility, do your homework, ask questions, and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PP Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britton Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.